the end of the day, all people need all things. They need somewhere to host their website, the digital infrastructure. So we like to think of it as, how you got Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So it's almost like a business hierarchy of needs. There's a foundation where, one, you've got to have a value proposition, something that you're selling. Then you've got to have customers. Then you need to be able to interact with them. And these days you can't do that without a phone and a laptop, which is your tech layer. Then there's a software layer, which is all the bits that stitch all that together, like your project management, your accounting software. But on top of that, transcending component, the CRM, that's that bit that stitches the customer into everything else in your business. And that's one of our main focuses. And then all of that allows automation. If you've got a system, then it can all talk and gather data and the stress off the person. So I guess we try to fight the complex as much as. I think the problem that people kind of equate it to being like a singular event, like just something that happens once and then we go and do something. All right, we've transformed, let's move forward. No, I think it's almost like a way of life. Think of the way of the samurai, if you will. You've got Kaizen, which is small improvements over time. Digital transformation, there's now new terms like continuous digital transformation, which is just fancy stuff to say, let's just improve things a little bit and like when you're trying to automate stuff, you can save 5 minutes by implementing one thing. But if you do that task 10 times a day, that's a huge saving at the end of the year, which you can then reinvest in automating the next process and the next process. And if you're not doing it, you are going to get so far left behind, it is not funny, particularly at the rate of change. If you think about how many days, weeks, months, years it takes to develop an application, and now we've got things like AI coming out of the woodwork, which I ask it, how do I do this line of code? And it can give me that line of code exactly how it should be. So the rate of growth in platforms is going to exponentially grow. So I wouldn't be surprised that in 5 years' time it'll be 15,000, and then another 5 years it'll be 30,000. So I think a lot of platforms do what you want to do, but not every platform is going to be completely aligned with your business and do everything that you need it to do. So what I would do is, rather than look at the features and functions of the software, is why don't you look at your own business first and see, what is it that I'm doing now? What is it that I'm going to need to do in a year, 2 years, 3 years? And really try to map out that strategy of what is it that I'm actually trying to get out of all of this, and will it lead to a business result? Because if you're buying platforms because you like the way it clicks, the way it feels, the way it does things, that one particular task, it's not really going to give you the end benefit that you're trying to get out of it. So I would start with, get a spreadsheet on the left, create a huge column of just what are my requirements. Maybe go have a look at some other software just to get an idea of what's available. But say you need project management. Do you need to be able to do time billing? Do you need to be able to have it integrate into accounting? What kind of reports do you need? Focus, or like your business focus first, and then prioritize them in what's critical and what's nice to have, because there are plenty of nice to have features out there. I like the way it links to my email. And some of those nice to haves could be that the team adopt it. So if it looks nice and it feels good, but no one's going to, then it's not really an effective product anyway. So there's a lot of things you need to take into consideration, not just that one particular app. You're starting out, a free plan could be a really good way for you to get to know what a platform is, maybe even find your feet on what it is that you actually need in your business. What's actually going to work for you? What's going to really just sort of be superfluous or get in the way? Or, say for example, task management things. One perfect example is Asana. It looks nice, it feels nice, it's got a free plan, you can jump in, you can add tasks, and it's really easy to add tasks. But the problem with it is that you add potentially too many tasks, and then you just get this fatigue and you don't actually use it. But then you can't operationalize it into billing, into meaningful reports at a certain scale. Someone marks something off, there's no audit log and trail to go, who marked it off, did they have permissions to do so, all of those sorts of things. So scaling issues, being able to do bulk data management, being able to assign new statuses and tracking things, because things start to get a little unwieldy after a while, and maybe you want to put some budget measures in to say this project should not be more than 10 hours for this task or something like that. You really need to, like I said, do that comparison. There is one platform that, as agnostic as we try to be, there are some that stand out as things that we recommend on a large basis, and it really does depend on where you're at in the phase of business. I think when you're really, really small, you're like 1 or 2 people, go for those free apps, those things that allow you to, do the free plan and then scale up a little bit. Things like HubSpot, that looks nice, feels good, it's got a free plan. We call it drug dealer pricing. First hit's free, after that it gets really, really expensive. Then they really get you once you're hooked. And then there's other platforms that have a really broad range of functionality, like Zoho One, for example, which has 50 plus applications, a lot of them quite configurable. There's a lot of freedom to do what you need to do, but then at a certain point it runs out of ability to change something, or at a certain scale you might need a particular function, and then you've got to integrate it, build it, customize it or something. So then there's other tools. So there's probably different phases. There's a small business phase, there's that intermediate phase where you're starting to really mature, and then there's that maturity phase where now you need better financial controls, better reporting, everything's happening remote, you've got more legal requirements that you have to deal with, and then you're probably looking at an ERP system, and then there's platforms that are somewhat quite expensive. But if you think about the offset of, for example, there's one like NetSuite, which is an ERP. You could go on the stock market with that. It'll follow all the rules and the laws and things that you need to be listed on an exchange. But then, yes, it's expensive, but it might cost you a whole person's wage for the licenses, but it'd probably save you 4 or 5 staff through automation and reporting and, any kind of like fines and things like that. In big capital letters, it depends. But I would say one that we tend to recommend on a regular basis, purely just because it answers the questions or answers the problems, is Zoho One. And we are a Zoho partner, we do have links to that. I do try to recommend other things on a regular basis as well. But like I said, we write down what the company needs first and then do a comparative analysis across, the top 3 or 4 that we think, and then ideally select the winning one. Sometimes you get a new employee come in, they go, oh, I've used this in this other business and it was good there, so I'll have to bring it over here. And you get all these like political internal chopping and changing, which what you should really have is a digital strategy which matches your business goals and strategy. And that's something that we advise on, that's something that we assist with. And when people come to us, it's hard to know what people need in a year, 2 years, but we try to map out, okay, well, when you get to this size, you're going to have a scaling problem due to not enough inventory, or you're going to need people management and HR, you're going to need some payroll stuff, knowledge management articles. We start to anticipate some of those needs because we've seen it time and time again. So there's generally 10 ways to address any one problem, but it's good to understand what that pathway looks like so that you're not chopping and changing platforms. Maybe it means you go to a bigger platform and you have a development cycle in that, so that when you get to 3 years, 5 years, then you're making a bigger, better decision into something else instead of having changed 4 or 5 times along that path. From the basic consulting perspective, it's where are you now, where you want to be, and how you're going to get there. So, say for example, you don't plan in isolation. You don't go, oh, I really like this application, but when you're talking about your own tastes and what you want it to complement, we might make a completely different set of recommendations if you're very Google centric and you use the Gmail and that sort of thing, as opposed to if you're Microsoft centric, because there's different platforms that are built with a different sort of perspective in mind. Whatever we get, we want it to play well with others. We don't want to have to use a lot of middleware, which is like those Zapier tools that connect this to that, because they break. 30 days, 90 days, they've got a password reset or an API reset, and then you've got to then log back in and reconnect it. So there's some maintenance required. And in that time, if it's passing invoices, well, now you're not getting invoices go out, or, some kind of like damaging metric. When looking at the other things in your business, maybe there's some change management procedures, maybe there's some, the business needs to evolve. And I think the happy zone is, you've got some people at one end of the spectrum that are not very technical and only want basic things. You've got other people that are super technical, that are very detail focused, that understand the technology. But the happy zone is in the middle, when you bring, the technical people, rein them in a bit, and then, bring up the less technical. And then when everybody's unified in that space where they can kind of collaborate and communicate and share information and knowledge and experience, that becomes really transformational in a business. So having a roadmap helps to, if you're getting people to change directions, it can be very difficult. So you want to do it gradually, and you want to make sure that whatever changes that you implement, you don't just walk in the next day and go, right, we're completely changing everything we do from tomorrow, because then you're going to have maybe a bit of mutiny, maybe a bit of change, you need to announce it, etc. So the roadmap helps to damage control, make sure the data goes across, make sure that when you go into the new system, you've tested everything that it's going to do what it's supposed to. And sometimes you might use a stepping stone solution because we've got that 3-year plan, that 5-year plan. We want maybe the business's goal is to list on the ASX, but today they're using a couple of, off-the-shelf free plan tools. I'm pretty sure that when it comes to project management, Rio Tinto are not using this for their mining projects. They're using an ERP that is designed specifically for that. So maybe there's we need to train the people, we need to find the right resources, we need to make sure that whatever the company is doing fits within this platform or that platform, etc. Obviously, it depends greatly on things like budget, size of team, etc. For a very small team, you can just quickly whack it in and go. You would have communicated that, but for the larger the company gets, the more you have to bite-sized chunk that down. And one thing we prefer is the agile development methodology. We were talking about that Kaizen concept before, where continually improving. Digital transformation is not a one and done, it's a continuous thing. So we might start with a very small project and then over time hold regular, whether it's like a weekly stand-up session to train or to get feedback from the users to say, hey, I've been trying this and it's not working for me, or I've been using, we sent this out to the customer and got this response. Now we can start to make those refinement tweaks along the way that help with adoption, that help with, I didn't know this until I started using it. Kind of those problems where, someone gets a little bit further down the rabbit hole because when they first get into a platform, if it's more complex, they're really only going to do all the surface level stuff. And then when they start trying some advanced things, might hit some roadblocks. So you need to be able to anticipate that where you can, or at least by breaking it down and go, right, this week we're just going to focus on implementing or using this part of the software. Then next week, because software is the formalization of a process. So the first thing we have to do is understand that they're going to be changing that process. And not you can't completely flip your business processes across your entire business overnight. It's something that requires time, training, consultation, stakeholder feedback and engagement. All of those things come together to help with that. When it comes down to doing a deep dive needs analysis, so one thing we do is the first phase, I guess, is finding out what it is what makes the business tick and what the problems are, etc. So ideally, we try to we look at their current systems and we find out what does the new system need to replace, what's working well, what's not working well. Then we interview different team members because everyone's got a different perspective. So we want someone from management, someone from middle, and someone from the coalface. And ideally, we'll identify what is it that's working or not working for each of the individuals, and they'll say, oh, I hate it when this happens, or I don't understand that, or I can't get information from. Then the next layer is a bit of research time, just to go out and say, like, these are the core competencies, and we will prioritize those from a most critical all the way through to nice to have. Someone goes, I don't like the way the email saves in the system. It takes me 3 seconds longer. Could just be that they just need to suck it up. Now, or they're used to using another platform which has some nice bell, click and wiggle kind of thing. So the next phase in the research is when we try to find, not only the main platforms, but try to find some nuanced solutions that could identify that, maybe it's fully custom or maybe it's partially custom. There are other ways. And then by using that spreadsheet is we then line them up side by side and then traffic light them. But also, sometimes that doesn't work completely because the features could be, I often, try to equate it. They're either tick the box with grey lead pencil, with crayon, or with a big black Sharpie. Is that one feature addressed properly, or is it only underbaked, or is it only just kind of like they can only basically claim that it does actually solve that? So by aligning them, we get to line by line, feature by feature, compare them, have an empirical kind of study and research, and it does take a bit of time. But then, by doing that needs analysis, we're addressing what do we need now, what do we need in 3 years, 5 years, and we're at least mapping as a bit of a risk mitigation strategy and whilst it is time consuming, getting it right at the start can save you tens, if not hundreds or millions of dollars, depending on the size of the project, in making sure that you have a solution and a roadmap plan for how do we deal with this problem that we know we're going to have when we reach this much revenue or this much headcount or whatever. I would say knowledge management is kind of the name of the game. That's what all these systems hold, some level of information. And one of the best ways to do that is with things like knowledge articles, when you're explaining how to do this, how to do that, so that someone else can come along and do that job with you or for you or in replacement of you. So one of the big things to remember when you're writing a knowledge article, if you're doing it yourself, great way to do it is record a video. Picture tells 1,000 words. But then if you're going to put it in a system, you need to have the actual words so that people can search it, because the search can't read the video. The next point I would make is get someone else to read it and interpret it back to you. Because if the instructions, because I have assumed knowledge, I assume that people know what I know, and you do that subconsciously. But other people don't have that same life experience. They've lived a completely different set of years to you in life, and they've done a completely different path, etc. So being able to have someone else read it back and tell you, I don't understand, or I'd like to know more about this, really helps you have better knowledge articles, which then helps other people help you. And I know we're talking about systems, but we're also talking about people. So that's probably my number one that we found as one of the biggest things that's helped us to scale up in the last little while.